Or hello guys, my name is Jack, and today I'll be talking about why Elden Ring's DLC falls short of certain expectations, even though it may be the best expansion pack that's ever been released. Jack Reviews! Yippee! We all know Elden Ring to be the game that brought FromSoft to the mainstream. After all, it's the culmination of every game they've made up until this point. All the lessons, all the refinements have been poured into what people are calling the game of the decade. It is one of my favourite games of all time, and I'm sure a lot of other people can say the same, eh? I was pretty excited for the DLC, but most of us didn't really know what to expect. After all, they were pretty tight-lipped about the extent of the expansion scope and its story. So Shadow of the Erdtree introduces perhaps the most radical gameplay changes to any FromSoft DLC. Instead of armor, vigor and smithing stones, Erdtree fragments are now your primary source of increasing your durability and your damage. Or maybe it's pronounced Erdtree, or I'm actually not sure, eh? Alright, whereas before you had the option of farming runes to level up and get stronger, this change forces you to scour the Shadowlands to find fragments in order to toughen yourself up. Personally, I quite like this change since it encourages players to explore the map and really take in all the DLC has to offer. A lot of the time, I saw my friends just rushing through the areas in the base game and getting a second-rate experience. Well, I mean, you can still do that, but doing that in the DLC might prove to be particularly hard, eh? Since they buffed the fragments not long after launch, you get more of the benefits early on, and you'll get diminishing returns as you collect more. Some will be right on the main path, and some will be tucked away in some sneaky hidden corners, eh? Now, one of my main points of criticism with the DLC is the map. For my first playthrough, it was confusing, but still a pleasure to explore, eh? The level design and the area transitions were wonderful and revelatory to find. But the thing is, that kind of wonder only lasts for the first playthrough. By the time I found myself retreading my steps, either for my first or second time, it felt like a chore, eh? Since the map is very dense and layered, it made navigation tiresome and tedious, especially when I knew I had done all this before, eh? Well, thankfully, you don't have to recollect Erdtree fragments on subsequent playthroughs, but the map design doesn't really cater for multiple runs, eh? All of the surprises and gimmicks wear off fast, and only end up being bothersome. And of course, in classic FromSoft fashion, they lock off a good chunk of the map behind a gesture, and there are whole areas you can miss by not venturing into an unassuming tiny area of the map. Some areas are also suffering from a painful dearth of content. Oh, I'm looking at you, Cerulean Coast, and Charles' empty grave, eh? You have all these beautiful looking locations, and there's barely anything in them. They could have at least added a few more outposts, or puzzles, or secrets, or anything really. Shadow of the Erdtree introduces some of the best and most memorable bosses in FromSoft's extensive repertoire. I personally thought Rolana and Mesmer were among the best I'd ever had the pleasure of fighting, but the same goes for negative experiences, eh? Or that bore-riding asshole Gaius and that dickhead of a final boss, both really pissed me off, eh? They did nerf Gaius a little bit, so he's not as much of a bother, but the final boss is still super detestable, eh? Or that little shit has huge hitboxes, and a phase 2 that makes Melania look like Godfrey, that shitty little Godric spin-off, eh? It's a visual maelstrom, and you're getting flashbanged every other second, with a face full of hair. You can't identify a single attack, and you don't have enough time to learn the moves before you die to some unimaginable combo, eh? Phase 2 doesn't give you any opportunities to learn, and instead it bombards you with a load of BS that only further justifies your own usage of BS. So in my opinion, anything is fair game against that asshole, eh? Now visually, the game is quite good looking, but I don't see many graphical upgrades from the base game, eh? Although a change in scenery is always welcome. For some reason, the look of a lot of areas, especially the ancient ruins of Raw, remind me a lot of Dark Souls 2, eh? As well as the level design. Or the multi-layer levels and how you get to one location by going through the crevices of another. It's really quite something, eh? The frozen dungeons are a nice change up as well. Overall graphical fidelity remains mostly unchanged, which means it's still a good looking game, but it's not exactly cutting edge in terms of graphics, eh? The excellent art design and cinematic framing still make the game a pleasure to look at. Or at some points, especially in the Escada Altus, I do feel as though the blue filter is quite strong, making areas appear an inky dark blue instead of black, even on my OLED, eh? It might still need a bit of adjusting, or maybe it's just on my end. Just as in the base game, audio is crunchy and satisfying. Every weapon delivers a succulent smack as you strike down your foes, especially if you've got a big ass sword and you're hitting like 5 dudes at once. Or not that I've done that from personal experience, eh? A few standout tracks in the soundtrack are those united in common cause, the Twin Moon Night, and of course, the Promised Consort, eh? And don't forget about the Shaman Village music, or the soundtrack overall, I thought was quite strong and it doesn't skip a beat, even when comparing to the score of the base game, eh? But despite this, I think I would still put Dark Souls 3's soundtrack at the very top of all FromSoft scores, eh? So I think I covered most of my sentiments about this game. The overall quality of the DLC is still far and above most other expansions and even most games. But the level design simply does not favour replayability, and the number of bosses are more tedious than enjoyable. FromSoft still have yet to create a better encounter than Sekiro's final boss, but I know that that target is in safe hands, eh? Even if they stumbled a bit in the DLC. One more gripe I have with the expansion is the lack of conclusiveness, especially in regards to what they teased about the narrative, with extensive marketing of Mikola and his journey, even going so far as to show him riding Torrent. Or we're given almost no explanation of how and why, eh? And what becomes of us now. Secrets are still left unanswered in traditional FromSoft fashion, but perhaps they were too many in number to even begin to address. Or well, at least now you get to check out some lore videos from the other YouTubers. Or maybe you can click into my channel and start looking at those marble blasting games I play instead. Or yeah, I would probably prefer that, eh? Well anyway, those are my thoughts on the Elden Ring DLC. It's still more or less worth it at full price. You're getting more than you would get with most other full price games, eh? But I definitely recommend getting it more on a sale. Or still, that being said, I would give the DLC a solid 8.5 out of 10, eh? Well anyway, that's been my thoughts about the game. My name has been Jack, and I hope you guys have a good one, eh?